everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome back to this week's Flagship show. I, as ever now, am Dan. I'm going to guide you through it. You'll be pleased to see the Bucs gear is back on. Tom Brady is staying, and we no longer have to go back into the shadows, Murf.
No, absolutely not. Although I'm curious by your Dan forever now. Like, were you someone else? were you going through like a Lewis Hamilton phase where you were like, you were actually going by like Dan-Louise or something like that? That I just need
back to Monday. I go by another name at weekends, so we'll leave that out.
Fair enough. That's what caught me more than anything. That tells you how my brain works. But yeah, no, Brady's back. Listen, what a great world we live in. On the same day that, the same weekend that Brady's back, Carson Wentz gets traded to Washington. So, every team has got their franchise QB. And in fact, we're talking on the day that Mitchell Trubisky has got a job. I mean, listen.
I know, right?
Some people get Tom Brady. Some people get Mitchell Trubisky. It's why we love this sport, because some teams now...
The Super Bowl actually went out after signing Mitchell Trubisky.
And Carson Wentz.
Bless him.
Yeah, I think this is why. Jack's coming with spicy chat nice and early. He goes by a different name in a WhatsApp group, I could tell you that.
Evening, Jack.
I love that.
We'll keep that private, please.
But no, busy day, and we're probably we've got an amazing guest, and we are going to try and keep to a format and script. But if there is some breaking news, because the legal tampering period is over. Oh, it started. So it's over. Amazingly, Alex Kappa signed for our guests Buccaneers within 60 seconds of the legal tampering period. So it tells you that D3 schools have amazing education because they're able to negotiate deals in less than 60 seconds. Indeed, fair play to them. But we have an awesome guest. I'm very excited for this one. Dan, do the introductions, my man.
Well, we are joined by a brand new 5 Yard Rush Dynasty writer. Is that right, Hannah? Hannah Rowland. How are you?
Oh, you're mute.
Oh, we've lost your mic, Hannah.
Or we've lost your mic. One of the two.
Nothing.
Your volume's gone on your. I think your pods have died.
Nothing like live broadcast here.
This is why we do it live. Live TV. That's right.
We can, Hannah. Welcome.
There you go.
Back.
Oh. Thanks
Hannah,
for having
tell
me.
everyone about yourself. Who are you?
I'm Hannah. I'm a Bengals fan. So pleased today because we've got 2 new O-linemen. They might not be the best, but they're better than what we've got. So I'm pleased with that. I'm a bit disappointed because Tom Brady came back to the Bucs and now we didn't get Jensen.
No.
You've had 3 brand new O-linemen to know otherwise.
Yeah, he was I had my eye on him. I like the idea of him.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't have signed Karras. Because they're playing. No. I doubt you would have signed Garrett. I mean, you could have signed 2 centers. I don't think you would have done, but
no. But I reckon Jensen and Kappa would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, listen, from experience, they're good offensive linemen. Kappa's amazing. So my favorite story of Alex Kappa is he played, or he attempted to play, the wildcard round, the Washington wildcard game with a broken leg. Tough as nails, D3 guy. Wouldn't say he's like elite, but absolutely solid professional. I think he made the Pro Bowl this year.
Yeah,
he's going to be knocking on the door of the Pro Bowl voting like the last couple of years. So he's definitely put in some great performances. I think he's finally put it together the last 2 years. So
yeah, I think I was reading he gave away no sacks in 2020. I think it was 8 last year, but look, it's better than our 70, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think anytime you can invest in your O-line with good, solid players, and again, part of the thing of like D3 school players is they come in with a chip on the shoulder. Like they've already gone through so much just to get drafted. Kappa was drafted, I think, in the 3rd round.
He was,
which is huge for a D3 player. You don't get many D3 players drafted that high. So it tells you how highly he was rated by the Buccaneers organization. So I think it's a great addition for the Bengals. Karras, don't know much about him. I know he played I know he was David Andrews' center, backup center for the Patriots. I know he played the year that David Andrews broke his I can't remember what the injury was. Is it a leg or ACL? I can't remember what it was. But I know he had a good solid year that year. So I don't know too much about Karras, but I think he played somewhere else last year. I can't remember where it was.
I think it was the Dolphins or somewhere like that.
That makes sense. Yeah, I can't say that centers are players that I track on a day-to-day basis, but
they're not ones for fantasy podcasts, are they? Let's be honest.
No, not really. But I think I know we're recording this kind of live. Before we get into Hannah and Hannah's story, I just wanted to catch up on some of the top free agency signings. We talked about Mitch Trubisky. He is a Steeler. Jags have been really busy. They have signed or will sign. All these things are not official till Wednesday. Right? Yeah. But they have signed Christian Kirk or will sign Christian Kirk. Fatukasi, Olakun. So that's a D tackle, a linebacker. So they've been very, very busy. The Jaguars. Browns have released Jarvis Landry. That was expected. The Cardinals paid big money to James Conner, $9 million a year for 3 years. $7 million a year for 3 years, but big money up front. Seahawks paid big money to Quandre Diggs, which I think he was terrific last year. Makes sense. Dolphins signed Chase Edmonds. Bengals, we talked about 4-year, $40 million deal for Kappa. It's big money for a guard, but it'd be interesting to see what the breakdown is year to year. But, I think he's a terrific player. Packers have re-signed Preston Smith, 4-year, $52.5 million deal. So they really have burned through their cap. To make space for that, Darius Smith has been released. They are still taking a $10 million hit this year on him, but they are saving $15+ million. And Billy Turner, offensive lineman, has also been released. Now, all teams have to get under the cap by Wednesday. I still think that the Packers still have a bit of work to do. I think all teams are pretty close. The Saints are within about $5 million now. But there's a few things still going on. Emmanuel Bose re-signed for the Dolphins. Falcons re-signed offensive tackle Jake Matthews, 3-year, $52.5 million deal. Huge name. We've talked about Karras to the Bengals. Rams signed Joseph Noteboom, $40 million deal. Lions re-signed Tracy Walker, who I think has been outstanding in the last couple of years. Lions re-signed Tim Boyle, because who doesn't want Tim Boyle in the NFL? Mitch Morse re-signed for the Bills, big signing. 2-year, $19.5 million is a lot of money for a center, but he is one of the best out there. AJ Bouye got released. Braxton Berrios re-signed for the Jets. I didn't even see that.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah, 2-year, $12 million deal.
Nice.
Who doesn't love Braxton Berrios? Bengals also signed BJ Hill, 3-year, $30 million deal.
Oh, great.
So that's a good deal to get him re-signed and done. He was great in the playoffs. So great to see BJ Hill back with the Bengals. I think I missed Jets O-lineman got signed as well. They put big money in on their own on Laken Tomlinson, who's a guard, 3-year, $40 million deal. So yeah, that kind of gets us up to date, I think, on the big stuff for now. Obviously, as we go through this podcast, there will be some breaking news. We will try and break it at an appropriate time and manner. Hopefully, it's something exciting. I don't. What would be okay? Open this up to everyone. What would be the most exciting signing that you could have, given what's already happened, and given the fact that something like Deshaun Watson is not going to happen during this podcast because he's going to visit teams tomorrow? What would be the most exciting thing that could happen in the next 55 minutes?
Maybe a Juju pickup somewhere.
Ooh. Okay.
I don't know.
Gronk I'd like Pines
coming back.
Yeah. I want him to the Bengals.
Who?
Well, Gronk to the Bengals.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
You
can have OJ Howard off us.
I would like to see. I'm trying to think what would happen. I'd like to see. I don't know, something like Zach Ertz, see where he ends up. I think
he signed with the Cards.
He has signed with the Cards. Yeah, that's right. So now that one's done. Not
a lot else, is there?
No, I mean, most of the quarterbacks. I mean, Allen Robinson would be exciting to see where he drops. Fournette, I guess, would be the one. I'd like to see what happens in the next hour with Fournette.
He's coming back.
I think so, because he released his statement and then he's deleted it.
Yep. Yep.
So to basically say goodbye to everyone and then delete that makes me think he could go somewhere. So we'll find out some stuff as we go through, and I'll keep it up to date as we go through. But we brought Hannah on not just because she's just joined 5 Yard and joined the ranks of the Dynasty guys, but because I think this is going to be a really interesting episode for people just getting into fantasy football, and people who are at this time of year, they've probably seen all their mates play last year, or they play very casually and thinking, actually, I really like to win my league. Harry, I'm getting trolled here by Harry, who's turned around and said to me that has my opinion on noodle legs changed. Purely and simple, because he turned up in a different team, and one, he won a Lombardi, and two, he doesn't have noodle legs anymore. He seems to have put some muscle on. He just finally sorted it out. So, yeah, my opinion has changed on Leonard Fournette. It's amazing what will happen if someone wins you a Super Bowl. Harry, when that happens for the Browns in 2052, then let me know, and you'll probably have your opinions changed on someone as well. It's like that's how you keep audience, right? Troll them. So Hannah's story is amazing. And I want to share this because I think there's going to be a lot of really good learnings for fantasy players out here, new and experienced.
Got my notebook ready. Yeah.
So I guess the first question is sort of, how did you get into the fantasy football? Like, because it really has only been the last 12 months. So how did you get into it? What sort of made you want to play?
Yeah, so I started off like as a very casual NFL watcher. Like, my dad got me into it a little bit. I went to the Bengals games when they came to London, got myself into it a bit more. Lockdown came, I live on my own. Kind of was like, what am I going to do with myself? Got a bit more into the NFL, and I was like, oh, really? I'm enjoying following what's going on and everything like that. And then I saw a post on the NFL UK Facebook group, and it was from yourself, Murf, that said, I'm putting together a rookie fantasy football league. Anybody interested? Just post in the comments. So I just said, yes, I'm interested in giving it a go. Joined the league, and the rest is history, really. So it was actually all thanks to you, Murf, that got me into this in the first place.
Yeah, you say thanks now. I'll give it a couple of years. You could be cursing my name.
I think we are cursing your name, but
yeah.
So Hannah, at that stage, can I ask, do you have an idea of what fantasy football meant? What it consisted of and involved, or you just liked the idea that there was some kind of game behind what you was watching?
Yeah, exactly that. I had like a very basic knowledge and understanding of the game and the players, and I wanted to learn more, and I thought, actually, this is a really good opportunity to learn more about different teams, the players on them, how they work. So when I joined the league, I had no idea. I didn't know what flex meant. I actually didn't know that it was a weekly contest and that every week you played a different team and it was a win-loss record. I thought it was total points at the end to start with. So I was like totally naive, had no idea about it at all. And then obviously going into the league, Murf was great. He did little videos for us, explained a bit about it, how it worked. I had a look at the playbook. He posted actually really kindly what will have been now 2020 playbook, the original. Yeah. I basically devoured that and was like, right, give me more. So I learned as I went along, I suppose, really. As I say, I had no idea what it meant. I actually have very few friends that are into the NFL. So I was like, I was never going to manage to get in there I don't have a home league, so I wasn't going to be able to start playing fantasy without getting into something like this. So when Murf's post came up, I was like, brilliant, this is an inroad for me to give it a go. I didn't actually realise I would get into it as much as I have. I thought it would just be a bit of fun, see what happens.
I think it's interesting insight for me, right? Because I did it because my mission years ago was I really want to end these random NFL.com leagues because they're not real leagues. When you join, it's a bunch of random people and no one sets lineups after week 3 and it's kind of like dead. There's no chat. There's no nothing to it. And I thought the people would join a league if everyone was kind of a similar skill. Like you have people maybe who've played 1 year but not really taking it that seriously, with people who have never played before. And like I thought it'd be really interesting dynamic just to see how people kind of respond to that. And I think for the most part it was positive. I think what was interesting was the questions that came through, because they're questions that I would never have even thought to have answered in a league, which was more around, like you said, like when people were baffled by the idea that you play different people every week. And like I completely forget that people don't even know what fantasy football is. So the fact of like having to explain like weekly fixtures and like the playoffs, I knew I'd have to explain, like I got that, but I was like, yeah, it's not total points, is you set a team every week. And I thought the draft aspect, that will take ages, the waivers, all of that. Got very few questions on that because I think people kind of got it quite quickly. But the actual concept of, oh wait, so I set a team every single week and I've got to play different people, and how does that work? And I was like, yeah, God, yeah, people are like, that was the insight for me, was the mechanics of it and people's fear of it. People genuinely fear fantasy football, like getting into it. Like the amount of people in that group, and not just in your league because I set 3 of these up, but people were saying, when I spoke to people when they wanted to join, it's like, I just don't want to be made to feel silly joining a league and like asking questions and not knowing like how the rules work. And I don't feel like I can ask questions in a league I'm in that says, how do I set a lineup, or like things like that.
That's exactly it. You know, it is, you know, having literally never experienced it before, it's really intimidating to go into a league where there's people that have played it for years. They know exactly what they're doing. They know how the league is working. Like waivers, free agency, all that really blew my mind to start with. And so it was just so nice to have these leagues where there's a bunch of people that have very little experience. I think most of the people in my league were, you know, casual NFL fans, but never experienced fantasy before. So we're all kind of learning together, and it was a great learning curve, especially before the draft. Like a lot of my learning came from when I joined the league, you know, speaking to you, getting all the stuff like pre-draft really. So learning what it all means, how the draft works, how, you know, you pick up on waivers and all that kind of stuff was all learned like with those guys, with you, you know, that way. And then once I'd kind of got the hang of that, a lot of my initial learning then changed to how do you draft, you know, and moving on to those kind of, you know, doing your different strategies and stuff. But all my initial learning was in that league with you and asking you loads of questions through that way. So it was a really nice way to get into it. And, you know, I would always recommend, if these leagues ever get set up for beginners or like, you know, 1 to 2 years, it's worth getting in them because people are just so open and happy to chat through things and discuss things. It really just helps set you off on the right foot, you know.
I'm sure in a league like that as well, others are asking questions that maybe you haven't even thought of. So to get them answers and go, I didn't even consider that. That's a great point. So, but I guess it means being in that group of peers in a very similar position actually takes a lot of the pressure off, and it means that you can ask a question without the intimidation and things like that. So it really does bring people out. So I'm actually going to presume a little bit here. You probably had quite an active chat in there and probably all got on quite well throughout the year.
Yeah, we did. It was great, and we've actually just set up our own little dynasty league that we're going to start this year. So I think you set up 3 leagues, didn't you, Murf? And I think our league is maybe the only one that's still going.
No, so what happened was the 3 leagues got set up. 2 of the leagues were very active, yours and it was a good social experiment, if nothing else, right? Yours and another league were really active, or at least had a very core group of very active players. Maybe there was like 1 or 2 that kind of like dropped out here and there. And then there was a 3rd league that was much quieter than the others. And I think it was made up of certain players who didn't really want to take on a lot of advice and kind of just try and work it out, mixed with people who perhaps have played before. And I think there was a group of people in there, maybe 3 or 4 players, who, because the chat wasn't that active, there weren't that many questions. And I was trying to like preempt stuff like, do you guys want any info on this? It was kind of like very little back and forth. And I was like, okay. So what happened was the 3 leagues have become 2. So yeah, it's become 2. So what's happened is that I basically took, so I think your league, 10 people remained of the 12. I think that's right. So 2 people came over, and then the other leagues basically combined because they were people who are happy to play. I was like, well, if I merge these 2 leagues together, will it work? And they did, because I think it was 10, 8, and then I think the other one was like 6. I think 2 and 4 kind of worked, like something like that. I can't remember the exact numbers, but that's kind of what happened. And I think it was interesting for me because your group chat was very friendly, and it was very much like, we're all in this together. Everyone kind of wants to learn and ask questions. And there was rivalries that developed, but it wasn't like silly, like ridiculous, like hatred banter. It was all like everyone was kind of in this together kind of thing. The second group was a little bit of rivalry, some needling, but on the whole was still really good natured. The third one just, again, had very, very little. And it was interesting to see how people's behaviors changed towards fantasy football based on group chats. And again, it fundamentally went back to, if you're in a league where people are chatting and it's active and people are involved, the league is better. It's just better. Full stop. Which is why home leagues are so great. It's why so many people have them. But not everyone, as you say, can have a home league because they don't have enough people who are into the NFL. So if we can create that environment and replicate and have more and more, like you said, you built a dynasty league out of it, it has become in its own right.
That is your home league. Yeah.
That's exactly
it is now. Yeah.
I classify that as my home league, and we actually agreed last year that the winner owes everyone at the London Games a beer.
Yeah.
So that's what they get for winning. What a prize.
High stakes home leagues.
Yeah.
But I think it's awesome.
That's what it's about. Yeah.
And I think that's it. I think it's just about having that community, isn't it?
I was like, right, I really want to do really well in this league. Because I was like, I want to just, it's my home league. I want to nail it. And I had Derrick Henry and Robert Woods, and the first few weeks, Cortland Sutton. I was like, right. I was like second place. I was like, this is going great. And then one by one, they either basically got injured or fell into irrelevance, and I didn't even make the playoffs.
Murf didn't explain that, did he? After all the talk of who you're going to draft, they're just going to get injured halfway through the year, and you're going to have to be picking up. Nobody's off the waiver wire. Dara Gumbawali played in a playoff game for me. No, didn't tell you that, did he?
He guaranteed me a win when I joined, so I'm very disappointed.
Yeah,
fine. So Hannah, I need to know, you joined that league. How did it pan out? How did it work out for you? How did it work?
So that league not so well. League not so well. As I say, I ended up missing out on the playoffs. So I was very disappointed there. But it started something. I don't know. I read the playbook 2020. I bought 2021, and I devoured it. And I just loved the strategy of the game. It just kind of got me hooked, and I loved reading about where you should draft players and why it makes sense to draft them in these positions, and why if you're not getting like one of these top quarterbacks, you should maybe wait, or similar with tight ends, why you should take them either high or low. And it's the strategy, like the statistics, all things like that. It's just something that really intrigued me. So I was like, right, I know I want to play more of this. At first I was like, okay, I'm just going to play one league this year, like get the hang of it, see what to do.
We all say that every year.
Yeah, how you get through waivers, how it works, really just focus on one to try and be a winner. And then Murf sent me an invitation to the FFCC, and I was like, oh, maybe, if Murf sent me an invitation to this, maybe it means that, I could be okay and enter some other leagues. So I think a few weeks later, I heard loads of people talking about the Scott Fish Bowl, and I was like, "Ooh, I like the sound of this." And so I just went on. Obviously, I was too late to register for the main one, but amazingly, I managed to get into the satellite.
Nice.
And I think It was like 4 weeks later. We were drafting, because obviously it's the first basically draft of the year, isn't it? Well, I had no idea what I was doing. It was a best ball.
You found MFL as well then?
Oh, well, that was bad enough. And then I was like, it was like, I think it's 20 odd rounds, isn't it?
22.
And I was like, I don't even know who half of these names are at the bottom. I was like, we get to round 18. I'm like, I don't even know who you are. Never mind whether you're going to help me or not. Obviously, I came last, but it was amazing. I met so many really lovely people in it. It was great. And it just went on from there. I joined, way too many general redrafts. And I actually loved the, those charity tournaments. They've been my favourite. It makes me feel good that I give money to charity, and it gives me the opportunity to play more fantasy. And I met so many amazing people through those charities, in those tournaments. And it's amazing when you see at the end, we gave this much money to the cause that we really feel passionate about. So it all kind of just stemmed the passion and kept me wanting to play more and more. And unfortunately, I probably did overstretch myself. I ended up in about 30 leagues, I think, in the end, over best ball and redraft, and 1 or 2 dinners.
That's just Murf sending you invites week after week. I can see it.
Listen, I mean, best ball's fine. Like, I write in the playbook that, like, best ball's best ball. You draft and you're done. Like, I see best ball as preseason, right? So I just do a ton of best balls. Because you don't have to do anything. You draft a team, it's done. Like, you do the draft, you meet people. It's just batting practice, right? So I'll do 50 to 80 drafts between sort of about now. I was a bit earlier last year. I've not had that motivation I perhaps normally have. To June, to just do best balls, because you start to understand just how to draft, where players are going. It becomes a bit of like muscle memory. The downside is you don't enjoy drafts in draft season as much. So like I get to draft season, I get to August, and I'm kind of like done drafting. I'm like, I've been doing this for 5 months now. I'm quite tired. I kind of just like, just because you're like in complete muscle memory auto pick mode, and you're just like, oh, okay, so I'm at the 408 and Robert Woods is on the board, so I'm just going to take Robert Woods because that's what I do at the 408, push, done, and move on. And it's like, you definitely sucks the joy out of it, so I don't recommend it. But obviously for rankings purposes and all the stuff I joined, Jack here is pushing DFS, which I definitely will get Jack.
That's what I did a lot of last year. I went away from best balls and went to DFS best balls pre-season, basically, and did a lot of those. So,
and it's definitely another way to do it, because obviously you're entering contests, there's money involved. I mean, they're very short, they're like dollar entries, and they're not exactly going to break your balance, but you get more somehow by
doing up in a hurry.
Pardon?
They add up in a hurry.
Yeah, well, but the thing is, you've got skin in the game, so you actually get better quality players. So it does your preseason now. It's a bit more. So sorry, go on. No, go ahead.
No, go on.
I was a bit slow on the DFS train, but got into it like later on in the season, and I really liked it. Actually, quite like it in season, because it is very different. You're looking. Obviously, you've got unlimited player pool with your money, but a lot of it's about matchups. Who's going to potentially get the touchdowns, have the most catches, etc., etc. But I really like the best balls, especially in my first year, especially early in the season, just to try out the different strategies that people talk about. Like taking the tight end early, taking numerous running backs and then wide receivers. How do you like the build of your team? Do you think it looks good? How would you do it different? And also like learning how to react to what other people do. Like last year, I found, for me as a beginner, I listened to a lot of what people said, which I still do try and listen to people's opinions, of course. But because I was such a beginner, I didn't know a lot. I'd be like, okay, Murf said that Robert Woods might be good this year. So I took Robert Woods everywhere. And then he got these things happen, but he got Cooper Kupp came out and dominated, and then he got the injury. So and he often was my wide receiver 1. that I took, because I would take a couple of running backs because I was like, right, I want to get those running backs. And then he would be my wide receiver 1. So I just found that I had way too much of him. And then that affected a lot of my teams and my leagues. So I think this year I want to kind of open up. It's different because obviously and a lot of what we do is we do a lot of different leagues. So you do have the opportunity to take players, different.
Diversify that pool,
from different, with the different leagues, which is a bit more difficult if you've only got 1 or 2. But I would not just take one player on it. It wasn't every team, but if he was there in a set round, like you said, I'd take him. And then I ended up with so much of him that it really did affect a lot of my team. So this year I would definitely plan to widen my horizon. So I had no Jonathan Taylor last year, which I immediately regretted. Well, after about week 6 or whatever, I regretted that. Pre-season I was like, nah, Murf's not that into him. I can kind of see why he might not be. It wasn't all from Murf. It wasn't
Hang on.
Murf. But when I first started,
we just remove Murf from the podcast now. We don't need him. He's out on Jonathan Taylor.
I've spent a year defending this Jonathan Taylor take. I said I just didn't like him where he was. All right, and I got it wrong. But I said he's a wide receiver 1 in the second round, like basically a running back 1. So I take him if he's available in the second round. I'm drafting him. He's not a top 10 pick for me. And people were drafting him at 6, and it worked. And like fair play, like it worked. Everyone else went down. It was, if you want to play survivor and it's the guy at the end, then lift the torch. It's all good.
So Hannah, you started with Murph's join a league. You ended up in about 30.
$1 million, yeah.
1,000,001 probably, yeah. Did you get any success from any of them?
Oh, do you know what? Amazingly, I did. And I actually didn't think I would because, again, speaking to people, they were like, look, first year, just, concentrate on trying to make it to the playoffs. And I definitely think some of my success was luck for sure. But one of my proudest achievements, actually not a win, but I came second in the Fantasy Football Down Under Bowl. And I was well pleased with that. Like, I'm not entirely sure how. Oh, yes, Benny Snell. I remember that one.
3 episodes talking about Benny Snell at the end of last season. So
I'd wised up by then.
You win some, you lose some.
Hey, listen, all I'm going to say is that Najee Harris completely declined at the end of the season. I was half right. I get half a point for that.
Hannah's telling us about her fantasy success.
Yeah,
come on,
exactly.
No, it's all right. But yeah, that was one of my proudest actually, coming second at the Fantasy Football Down Under Bowl. But I was a winner in one of the 5-yard listener leagues, which I was really pleased about.
So have you got a T-shirt yet?
I do. I was going to wear it, but I thought that might be bragging. So
I've been playing 5 years and I haven't got a T-shirt yet.
Haven't you? You see, I actually genuinely didn't really think that my year was that, exciting. If I'm honest, I didn't think I'd done anything, anything different to anyone else. If I'm honest, but yeah, I was really pleased with my results. Now next year, probably, I'm not going to win anything, but I was just I've got the T-shirt, so you'll have to join the crew at some point then, Dan. But you did win your BFFL conference, didn't you? So you beat me.
My BFL actually have the best record of all teams, so we won't worry about that. That's fine.
Yeah, so there you are. So you win some, you lose some, isn't it? But I did win one of the redraft,
nice.
And one of my best bowls, which was actually interestingly where I took the tight end in the first round.
Okay.
I was like, I'll give this again, make a change.
Yeah. So for somebody listening now that's in the position you was in 12 months ago, right? They're an NFL casual. They've heard of fantasy. They kind of read a bit about it, but not really sure. What would you advise them for getting into it? And what would you advise them was the key to your success, really? Where should they focus their time and effort?
So for me, I think a lot of it is about keeping up with what is going on in the league because things change really quickly week to week. So what you draft is very rarely what you end up with at the end of the year, which I was very surprised. I don't know why, but I was very surprised. When you finish your draft, you think, oh, right, I've got this team and it's amazing. And then actually by the end of it, half of them are injured. Half of them, the quarterback's, rubbish. And not rubbish, but they're not getting the touches that you thought they'd get, and you end up with totally different randomers that you never ever thought you'd have by the end of it. So I think a lot of it is keeping up with what's going on. So for me, I listen to quite a few different podcasts. So especially in the season, you need to know who you want to pick up on the waiver wire. And some, you'll get an idea. Someone's gone down injured. You kind of got an idea who's going to be next up. For me, I didn't actually know, or what I struggled with is in those leagues that had the fab, how much should I put on it? How much is too much? How much is not enough that I'm probably not going to get that player? I really struggled with that. And so I found that the podcast really, really, really helped me. And I think, it's a game of strategy, and it's all about, all you got to do is be better than the other players in your league. You don't have to be like the best ever. You just need to be ahead of the game and a bit better than everyone else. So I have to say, I really did love the playbook, because it had those strategies in it, and it just helped me understand it a bit more. But it's all about fun, isn't it? And I think, as a beginner, you've got to put into it as much as you want to put into it. So if you just want to go draft a team and then, not think much else about it, then play a best ball, and go from there. But if you want to get, a bit more serious about it and potentially try and win, then I would say, the strategy is important. So things like the playbook helped me. I read a few other things that, like the consistency guide and Joe Pisapia's one, I found really useful, just for different ways to draft and what players might be useful to draft. And then I just listened and read a lot. It's all just about increasing your knowledge and being ahead of everyone else. I also like Twitter.
Go on, sorry.
I just like Twitter just for the beat writers. Because if you're looking at your phone at that time that they say someone's got injured in practice or whatever, you can get in there and get your, pick up that player before anyone else can.
Yeah. So have you found that reading all those, them bits, you obviously took in their opinion of where a player should be, or an idea or a strategy. Have you kind of molded them and found Hannah's strategy and Hannah's values now in your head?
I think it's still a work in progress, and I suspect that will be for me for some time. What I personally would like for myself is to obviously I appreciate other people's opinions that have done this for a long time and use some of their opinions, but also use them to formulate my own. But I also want to be able to watch the film and say, I think this player, looks good. I can identify if this player might break out, or whatever that might be. And I'd also like to look at the stats myself. So I kind of want to make my own little, how do I make my tiers? How do I rank my players? But I think when you first start, it's a lot, and I like using other people's and just, like you say, amalgamating them to make your own. So Murf might have Benny Snell as the 10th running back, in his ranks, and someone else might have him as running back 40. And then you've got to decide yourself, haven't you? Where do you want to put him? Do you want to put him at 30? Do you want to put him? So it is useful. And some people do put like Excel sheets of everyone's different ranks, and then, you make their own. If you copy them, often what you get is that people don't know. They know who's adding ranks, rankings. If you're copying them, people are gonna, this is what you've said to me before, Murf, people are gonna guess that you're following them and nick it before you manage to get them. So strategic about it. So yes, I kind of last year I didn't sit down and write down my rankings. I kind of just did it as I went along. Sometimes I would sit there for ages in a draft trying to pick a player, and who should I pick between Tim Patrick and someone else who's similarly not going to be my wide receiver one? I'd be there for ages. Whereas I think now, like this year, I prefer to write my own out, and have it there. And you can just be like, right, I've got this one here. Click, move on. It saves a lot of time.
Murf, can I come and ask you? Hannah's obviously said she does a lot of reading and researching and the strategy behind it and so on. You ran these new guys to fantasy leagues. You had a lot of questions from them. I'm going to guess, knowing you, it's not the first time you've done it either. If somebody came to you and said, I'm thinking of doing it, how do I start? What do I do? What's the one bit of advice you would offer up to them? Would it be something similar, or?
I think I'd always answer the question with, what do you want to get out of it?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that will massively depend on the advice I would give.
Yep.
If the advice is, I want to create a really fun league for people like myself or my friends, or I just want to join a league where I can have lots of fun, then I would propose that everything you do is to make it fun. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say, well, listen, to make it fun, you need a really good, I'd suggest a WhatsApp group, get to know everyone, have some chats going, put in some forfeits, put in some prizes, and I'd focus more on the league element of it than on the strategy element, because it'd be like the whole point of this is to make it engaging and fun. If someone says to me, well, I want to get into this because I want to win leagues, I'm a competitive person, I love games, I love the idea of just playing against random people and winning, then my advice would be very different, and it would be more focused on the strategy element. And the one thing I've said to Hannah repeatedly over the last 12 months is and to other people, that I don't think the strategy element is ever really covered in great detail in a lot of places, because whether that's just because people are scared of it, people don't feel that there's a strategy to it, people don't feel like, I think the game theory part is why Hannah has got the results that she's got, because she's understood that there is a game theory. That's the first thing. People just think it's names and stats, and people can sit there and study all the last season's players and all the last season's productivity and just pick players based on that. And you know what? You'll probably do all right. You'll probably get into the playoffs picking off last year's stats if you stay relatively injury free, and you'll probably, have fun doing it. But are you going to consistently outperform the mean? No, because eventually that will all run out. It's more luck based. It's like poker. You have to sit there and think about how you can tilt the odds in your favor. And there's so many aspects to game theory that are really important. And the first thing is just understanding that there is game theory in every single league, in every single type of fantasy football. There is game theory, and it's not just, but it's not just about strategy of where to take players. One of the things that I did on the Patreon last year was talking about when to stack, when to get handcuffs, when to drop handcuffs, when to pick up certain types of players, when to drop certain type of players, when to refresh your entire bench for the playoffs or before the playoffs. And we talked about it, you and I, on this pod, Dan. And I think they're the elements that you don't pick up straight away. Like, they take work and research and everything. So going back to your original question, the question always goes back to me, and that I give back is, what do you want to get out of this? If you want to have fun, I will tell you 10, 20 ways in which you can have an absolute ball playing fantasy football. And some people just aren't serious. They play 1 or 2 leagues every year, and they put some money down, or they do some beers, they do a live draft. Do you know what? That's brilliant. Like, I'm not going to tell people how involved they should get in the hobby. Like, it doesn't matter. If you're getting fun and enjoyment out of it, that's what matters. But if you want to get to the point where you're competing in charity tournaments, you're going deep in charity tournaments, whatever, where you just want to win, you've got that hunger and desire to win games, then, there's a different answer to that. But I think, for me, it's what I liked about the groups last year was there was a nice blend where I think the social, having a good league element was triumphed slightly over the wanting to win. But there was a very nice balance of both, where people wanted a nice environment, where people wanted to learn, but people wanted to win. And I think that's a nice, if you can get that environment for when you start playing,
it's perfect.
It's perfect, because you get the best of both. You get that hunger to want to do more and play in more leagues and meet more people. And you'll find that a lot of people do want that. They want to play in engaging, entertaining leagues and also want to win. And I think there's more people like that but it's about finding that balance so that neither is overly tilted over the other. So I think my advice would be, if you want to get into this, you can always hit me up. I'm going to do the rookie leagues again, but vice versa. Reach out to people like Hannah, because you're 12 months removed from the story. I'm 22 years into fantasy football. There are things that I just don't think about. Like, I did not even think about the fact that I had to explain it's a head-to-head league. Like, I just don't. It sounds stupid.
You wouldn't, would you? No.
I just wouldn't. I know there's things I'll need to explain in the game, but that was like one I just didn't even think that people would. And that was one I spent more time on, explaining how the actual winning of fantasy football works than actually explaining like.
I can just see you now with that question coming again. Okay.
Oh yeah. That's exactly what it was. By
the
way,
we're starting here.
I do have a bit of news here. First of all, Christian Kirk's contract. Wouldn't normally mention it, but this is silly money. Christian Kirk has signed a 4-year deal worth $72 million that would rise to $84 million.
He's never had 1,000-yard season, has he?
No. So he got the Kenny Golladay deal. Congratulations. That is mega money. His agent needs to wow. I just saw that a few minutes ago. I was like, wow. That's madness. So yeah, I think why Hannah was successful was she understood early that the game theory was that's the part she enjoys, right?
Yeah.
So it goes hand in hand. It's if you enjoy strategy games and that mindset of being in a strategy, you're always going to do okay, even if you don't necessarily see immediate results.
Well, that's it. You can almost take player names out of it if you're playing that game theory bit and have it as player A, player B, player C, and you're looking at the theory behind each. Who they are, where they are is irrelevant, effectively.
I've always said for years that I could draft a pretty mediocre team and still win a league.
Yep.
You can lose a league at draft, but you very rarely win a league at a draft. Stocks and I've said this for years. But I can take a team. I think back to my Warrior Bowl team from the inaugural Warrior Bowl. And I look back on that team and I think it's one of the worst drafts I've ever had. I didn't like it when it was done. I really hated it after week 1. But I knew how to get out of that situation. That's why you'll never see me with an 0-1 or 2-win record very often. Because no matter what, I'll always back myself to get 4 wins just based off working the waiver wire and the strategy element of knowing when to pick and when to release players based on the ebbs and flows of the season. Like, I always know I'll get that many extra games. It's just how many games can my drafted team get me for wins to stack on top. And that's the difference between making playoffs and not. You were going to say something, Hannah?
Yeah, just the other thing I would say, going back to what we would say to people starting out is that don't be afraid to ask questions, whether that be in your league or reaching out to any of us. When I first started doing best ball, actually I learned about best ball from the playbook, and I said to Murf, how can I play best ball? And he set up very kindly one league for me there, but also Tom, who is Best Ball UK, is in NFL Best Ball UK. He set up a couple of free ones too. So I joined those and I just messaged him and said, like, how does this work? What do you consider the strategy for this? How is it different from redraft? And I just asked him so many questions. And even now I still get in touch and say, so, what would you take away from the 2021 season, Tom, for best ball? And what do you think for next year? And I met loads of really great people who have always been very willing to answer my questions, and I just ask. And I think that's another reason why I've been very lucky, because they really kindly answer my questions. But another reason why I think I probably did reasonably well is because I wasn't scared to ask, and people really were really
people will spend their time.
Yeah, so really don't be afraid to reach out. People are lovely. There
are very, very few bad eggs in the fantasy community as a whole, and within the UK, I think it's even less. So,
just a quick one: Devondre Campbell is going back to Green Bay, 5-year, $50 million deal. It's a good deal for
Okay,
good deal for Green Bay. That I think he was inspirational last year in that D. They've obviously signed him to a team-friendly upfront deal. I think 5 years, $50 million is pretty good money. So, Devondre Campbell back to Green Bay.
So, Hannah, how will you take what you've learned in your first 12 months? How will you change it or apply it moving forward in this next 12 months?
So from general, wow. I mean, there's so much that I have learned. I'll tell you what, the one thing that really, like the waiver wire, it's like a beast in itself. And it took me, I would say, the whole year to figure out how best to use it. So this year, I'm planning to, I think I need to be quicker. So I kept like Tyler Higbee on my team for way too long because I was like, he runs loads of routes. He's clearly going to start producing for fantasy, and he just never did. I just need to be quicker, drop in quicker, pick some up. I could have picked up Dawson Knox. I could have picked up Schultz, and they would have really helped me for my team. So, as I say, I actually found the waiver wire quite scary to start with. And I would say for people, like, don't be afraid of it. Just go with the strategy and go with it. So that's, spend a fortune on that running back that's emerging, if you want to. But just know that if you're going to do that, you're going to have nothing else for anyone else. So I'm just going to be braver, I would say, on the waiver wire.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try new things. So like I said before, pick up different players that I haven't picked up before, even if I'm not totally sure about them. Because who would have said Cooper Kupp was going to be the wide receiver one last year? No one. No. So I picked up Robert Woods everywhere. If I'd have just got 1 or 2 shares of Cooper Kupp, I might have won more leagues than I did. Be brave. Pick people that you're not totally sure of. If it doesn't work, you'll just drop them and pick up someone else as they emerge through the season. And enjoy it.
The early weeks always have on the waiver wire, always have this guy wasn't drafted by 12 people, so he can't be any good. He's left in that pot for a reason. But the key is that none of the 12 people know how teams, especially in the early 2-3 weeks, are going to play out, how certain positions are going to roll out, how usage. There's a head coach's change, there's coordinator changes, there's play caller changes. No one factors that into a draft. You can't until you actually translate it to a field. So because someone hasn't been drafted in 25 rounds by 12 people doesn't mean they're worthless at all.
The other piece of information I would say is that at the start of the season, most drafts either occur before preseason or during preseason.
Yep.
And you've got no data to go off. What you've got is old data, incomplete data that's effectively wrong because the NFL changes. As soon as it turns, we're watching a whole new team sign. We've got new coaches, we've got new coordinators, we've got new players, you've got a whole different locker room. Teams are not the same. Everything changes. So like everything we knew last season, we kind of have to keep in the back of our mind, but it is in the back of our mind. If you work off that and you use that as your point of reference, it's going to be wrong. So but unfortunately at the start of the season, when you draft, that's all you've got. You haven't got anything else. So you have to sit there and think about, in the early weeks of the waiver wire, it's not the fact that people were wrong, it's the fact that we just didn't have good data. And therefore, we now have data that now suggests that this is the way we should go. The problem, and your point there, Hannah, is spot on, is that people are afraid. They get what I call draft love, where they fall in love with a player that they have drafted. They've gone, I picked him for a reason. I picked him because he's going to do this. And you spend weeks trying to justify your own selection. And that's where people go wrong. That is the fundamental point between winners and losers of fantasy football. I will cut anybody on my roster at any time for whatever reason. I don't care. If they're not going to produce, or I don't think they're not doing it, at some point they've got to go. Now, you have to assess when the right time is. There is a bit of feel in that, and sometimes you'll cut players too early, and sometimes you'll cut them too late. That is always going to happen. You'll never perfect it. There were times I moved on from Dalton Schultz last year, and he then came back and had a strong end of season. These things happen. But at the same token, you're going to be more right than wrong. And as long as you're constantly refreshing your own player pool and you're refreshing your team, you're always going to give yourself the best opportunity to win, which is why, one of the strategy points I always say to people is make sure you've got bench spots where you just recycle players every week. Because one, you don't end up falling in love with them because they always go off your roster before you've had them on. But two, you're always they're easy people to cut. Is when it takes away that need to drop somebody because you drafted them. You think, well, okay, I'll just drop this person because they didn't do anything last week and I just picked them up. It just makes it so much easier to have these transition spots on your roster. And you don't think of them as players. You just think of them as spots where you pick people. And then the decision comes when you pick that person, they go hot for 3 weeks. And you think, I probably should keep him over. If I've not paid Tyler Higbee for 4 weeks because I've picked up Dawson Knox, I should probably cut Tyler Higbee. And then that's where it comes in. But again, that comes to the strategy and the gameplay and just being a little bit ruthless in the sense of you want to win, you've got to make tough calls. Same way in the NFL, you can't get to keep everybody. That's not how the game works. You have to make those tough decisions. The Packers would not have wanted to cut Zadarius Smith today, but they've had to because they've paid Aaron Rodgers and they paid Preston Smith and they paid Devontae Campbell, so someone has to go. That's the way it goes, and that's why I love the game so much, because it mimics so many of those real life elements in a much smaller microcosm kind of way.
I think bench management is probably, what I kind of felt last year is probably the most important thing about winning, because if your star running back goes down, it's handy. Or if a star running back goes down, if their backup is already on your bench, you haven't had to pay anything to get them onto your team. And it's difficult sometimes. You don't always know when someone's going to break out, like some of the right wide receivers, whatever. But by just having those players that could potentially give you more at any point on your bench, there's a chance that one of those is going to hit at some point, and then they're really going to help you out. And I think I didn't understand that probably for 3/4 of the year, and it was only the last kind of quarter that I was like, I've made such a mess for myself, for some of my teams. So for all the not all the success, for the few successes that I have, I certainly had many failures, and I don't think I had any that didn't win any games, but I had a couple that were like 1 or 2. And when I had a look at those, I was like, this bench is a state. I've got myself into this terrible position where all of these players, they're not going to give me anything. So if someone goes down, I have nothing sat there useful that I can put in the place. If I'd have been active and recycling my bench, like Murf said, from the get-go, then I may well have had some players useful that I could have plugged into there that would have won me more games. Okay. So I think sometimes people leave the bench just sitting there until something goes wrong, and then they go, oh, crap, I need to do something.
And it fits in, and this is where the FPL element of fantasy football comes for UK players. Because in the FPL, and people play FPL, because the bench is such a pointless aspect in FPL, like it doesn't matter because you get transfers anyway, and you can select whoever you want. The bench is effectively fodder. And people translate FPL into fantasy football in the same way. My bench doesn't matter. They're just people I have to have. And that is the biggest critical difference that you can have. And it's just with bench management, and this ties in with Fab. People's fear of Fab is irrational. It's hilarious. The amount of people that do not want to spend Fab dollars early in the season is, bear in mind, comical. I always have been someone who says I would spend the majority of my Fab quite early on in the season. And now, more than ever, am I convinced that if I dumped all my Fab by week 6, I don't care. Because
I think I read something somewhere once of all the Fab in all the leagues, I think only about 15% of it ever actually gets spent.
Yeah. And it's crazy because if you went and spent all your Fab on the name has completely escaped me. The 49ers running back when Mostert went there. Yeah. If you spent all your Fab on Elijah Mitchell in week 2, week 3, you were probably pretty happy at the end of the season that you'd blown all your Fab on Elijah Mitchell. Whereas people would have kept their fab and then would have spent it on someone like Dario Gumbawali in week 16, week 17, who, listen, he had a decent performance. But and if you're in the championship and you won because of that, congratulations. On the flip side of that, you look at the yield of return. If I spend $100 on Elijah Mitchell and he gets me into the playoffs and wins the league, that's 15 plus weeks I've had that player. The tangible return on that is brilliant versus paying someone, money in the playoffs. In order to win the league and win the playoffs, you have to get into the playoffs, which is why I've got absolutely no qualms in spending my money prior to the playoffs to get into the playoffs. And then, yes, you might get a situation where Rashard Penny comes up late and you might miss out on him. And that would be a shame. But that doesn't happen as often as people think it does, whether I'd rather have the player that gets me there. And that's the bench management piece that I think is underutilized in podcasts. People will talk about, you should pick up this player, but actually it's about why you pick them up. Yeah. What are you trying to achieve by picking them up? I think is just as important. Just a quick one. The Seahawks have signed Will Dissly to a 3-year, $24 million deal. To sit behind Noah Fant in
a trade. Okay. Fine. Hannah, 2022 is coming up. What are your fantasy aspirations coming into this year?
I just want to continue to get better, really. For me, this is actually very early in my journey. I have still so much to learn. I really don't think you know everything by the end of your first season. The intricacies, it looks, from the outside, it looks like a very simple game. And in some ways it is. You put in, a set number of players into your lineup every week and you win or you lose. Mm-hmm. But there are lots of intricacies to it that I think take some time to learn. So I just want to learn more and more and get to know more and more people. Because to be honest, one of the things that I've enjoyed the most is the people that I've met. I've met so many amazing people. Okay, not necessarily in real life, but I don't actually have many friends that are NFL fans. So coming into fantasy, I've met so many people that enjoy the NFL, have some, get a chance to talk to them, talk fantasy, which I've never had a chance to do before. Mm-hmm. So I just want to, meet more people. I want to get better. I've started doing a little bit of research myself. So that's partly why I'm come on board to 5 Yard. So I'm actually doing a little bit of redraft to start with.
Nice.
Some redraft articles, and then we'll see how things get on. But
you've done some great pieces on running backs recently.
Yeah, just what I was really interested in this year. Sorry, I know we're going over, but just really quickly.
No.
What I found also last year was that actually consistency and reliability are really important. So, if you're drafting someone in round one, their draft capital is so high. You want them to be reliable, and you need them to perform on a weekly basis. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to know how many of those that we drafted were reliable, because you want to pick someone that you think is going to give you consistent production. Now, obviously, you're going to get injuries. You can't, And I just wanted to find out how reliable had people been. Should we have been picking rookie running backs? What did they give to us? What's the chances that they're going to help us next year? And I just wanted to have a look into that a little bit more. And that was partly from you, actually, Dan, because obviously I was looking originally at the top 12, so the wide receiver ones, the running back ones.
In redraft, I'm a big avoider of rookies, generally speaking, because I'd always take a known entity over an unknown. It works sometimes it don't. But that's how I value it. Is I'd sooner take the known than the unknown. But so I'd be intrigued to see how the different things pan out when you get to work on them and compare them to those experienced heads as well, and what pick values there are.
What I will say, something you just said really triggered something in me, and what you said was no, in a good way, in the sense of look at Ali, he's in love. Hi, Ali. Which was around, you mentioned you're in your first year transitioning, you're not going to expect to know everything in year 1 or year 2. At 22 years in, I don't know everything. The reason why is you can never know everything, because the game reinvents itself. Yeah. Because when I first started playing fantasy football, quarterbacks were drafted in the first round. You didn't draft running backs at all. And this is in the era of LaDainian Tomlinson and Priest Holmes. You just didn't really draft running backs, yet they were your league winners. If you had LaDainian Tomlinson and Priest Holmes, I had one team. Yeah. In fact, in my 2001 team, I had both. Right. And I won my league by an absolute country mile. Like, I absolutely stormed it because I had both of them and Peyton Manning. Job done. Like, it was crazy. Like how you can get good players, but the strategy's different, and like the strategy will continue to be different. If you 2 years ago in the playbook, I talk about you don't take a quarterback early at all under any circumstances.
We've already spoken about how that might change. Yeah,
exactly. Now the whole landscape's changed. If you don't get one of those top 6 quarterbacks, you are in a bit of trouble. There is a penalty to pay. Now that doesn't mean you should reach for quarterback 7, quarterback 8, quarterback 9, but your team is much better off with a Josh Allen over a Ryan Tannehill. And actually there is the perennial shift now is that actually you need to pay up to get these guys a little bit. Not necessarily advocating just Josh Allen, but someone in that group versus not having them because you're advantageous. People now will be very scared next year of taking a first-round running back because of the high propensity of injuries. I'm not sure if that's necessarily the right strategy, but that's something that will be researched and looked at in terms of how things change. And the game changes. So just by the time you figure everything out, the whole thing goes topsy-turvy again, and you've got to resolve it. And that, I think, is one piece of advice to new players and people who are just getting their handle in the game, is that don't just assume that the game is the same every year, because it actually will make slight changes and then fundamental changes. Like I remember when tight ends were a thing, and now they're not a thing. I mean, unless you play premium, they're just not really a big thing in fantasy football unless you get one of the elite ones. And then the same token, I remember when everybody just took wide receivers in the first 4 rounds and didn't take anyone else. Like again, probably not at that stage. So yeah, just some things that I just thought were interesting that you said them that I wanted to clarify.
But that's the fun of it though, right? That it changes.
100%.
Yeah. You know, if it you always knew, I draft running backs in round 1, wide receivers in round 2, quarterbacks in round 3. This gets boring and stale, doesn't it? And actually, some of the fun of it is trying to find what new things can I do this year that other people haven't grasped yet that will give me the advantage, because it's all about just getting advantage over other people, isn't it?
And that's a huge thing. It's just if you can start to understand that, then you're going to be in a great place. And that's the fun of the game, is if you like puzzles or problems and challenges and strategy, then this is the game for you. And if not, then you know it might not be.
That's why I like drafting on the turn a little bit as well. I like drafting on either end and doing something totally unexpected and out of the ordinary a little bit, and just because then everybody isn't just going, I'll take a running back now, I'll take a quarterback now, and all of a sudden they've actually got to think about what's sat in front of them, because the whole dynamic has just changed in 10 minutes in front of their eyes. And if you can throw them off their thought pattern and their thinking process, that will benefit you in the long run, I'm sure. So
one of my favorite strategy pods that we did years ago, Stocks and I, right, was talking about drafting on the turn, right? You've just brought this up. And how my favorite thing to do that particular year was to take 2 players at the same position on each turn.
I'm in a draft right now, and I've done 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and 5 and 6. Exactly that.
Yeah. So because what it does is it causes 1, a depletion in the player pool, and 2, it forces a run. So if you do it in a Superflex league and you go quarterback, it forces people. Yeah. The psychology,
because otherwise you're picking running backs and wide receivers behind everybody. So get ahead of the second one and force their panic, and then when it comes around again, you're ahead of the curve again. I took 2 quarterbacks. What did I do? I took 2 quarterbacks first in Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts from the 12 in a super flex. I then went with bear with me, Devontae Adams and DeAndre Hopkins. 3 and 4, probably a bit of a reach on Hopkins in the dynasty, and then Antonio Gibson and Cam Akers following that.
And it causes people to rethink the strategy. The downside of that is, if you get it wrong, it's a very expensive mistake, because if you go
a dynasty league, it'll pan itself out in time.
Because if you go quarterback, and then no one takes, there's very few quarterback picks between when you could have selected and when you did, then you've overpaid, and that is where the nuances of that strategy kind of can fall apart. But it's a funny thing to do. I would recommend everybody to try it at least once because it's funny watching people's faces.
I had one last year in a tight end premium where I did it, and I took Kittle and Kelsey, I think, on a turn, and that was it. Suddenly there was like the end of the second round, and people are drafting
like
all sorts
Robert
of tight ends from nowhere. Yeah, basically because they're like, this is a tight end premium, and I haven't got one, and everyone else has. Great, I'll let all the wide receivers come back to me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, when that happens, it's a good thing.
The beauty, I think, of fantasy football, though, is that it can be exactly what you want it to be. Like, if you want it to be fun and, you don't want to think too much about it, you just pick your favourite players. Yeah. It can be that. If you want to get into the nitty-gritty, look at different draft strategies, how can you beat everyone else, then it can be that. And that's the beauty of it. It can be exactly what you want.
The thing I love as well is no right or wrong. Nobody's right or wrong until we get to January. No matter what you do, no matter who you draft, no matter how you draft, no matter who you pick up, there's no right or wrong until we get to January. And everyone can have their opinion on it, but there is no right or wrong until January. And that's the key. So,
Mo Cox is going back to the Colts on a 3-year deal. So he's probably a starting tight end next year. Who will be throwing him the ball, though? That is the question.
Jimmy G's the biggest rumor at the minute. But
will it be Jimmy G? Will it be Jacoby Brissett? Will it be Andy Dalton? Will they draft a QB?
Jameis Winston's still out there. He's not a Colts quarterback.
I'm interested. How are the Saints? The Saints are saying that they're interested in Watson, right? How are they going to squeeze him in with their cap hell? How are they going to manage to do that?
What they'd probably do is trade for him and then restructure his deal by moving as much of it into signing as possible, because basically the signing will then move over the next 4 years of his contract. So if you convert 40 million into signing, then that's basically you're only paying 10 a year for 4 years, even though he gets all the money up front. So the advantage of the player is, I get all this money now, so I get one big paycheck. Cheers. Yeah. But actually, for the counting purposes, because people think that the salary cap is like literally how much they get paid that year, and it's the biggest misconception. It's just in accounting purposes. Actually, when they get the money, it doesn't matter. Yeah, the cap doesn't exist.
No, I totally
it doesn't make the sense.
That is not what they get paid. However, I don't know what they are
when
now.
They get paid, or when they get paid. They're only 6 million. They're 6 million over as of.
Yeah, they had a huge restructure on Kamara, didn't they? So
yeah, they've done huge restructures and huge deals. So they're not that far to get back under.
But they're still over. So if they're then paying him 10 million this year, let's say, in cap, then I guess they're going to have to do a lot of restructuring or potentially lose a few more people to squeeze him in.
And that's what the Saints do every single year until eventually something's going to happen where they're going to have to pay the piper. Very similar to Chelsea Football Club. They were like, when Abramovich sat there and kicked all the money down the road, I'll recoup it on the sale, and now he's not going to get a penny. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's a risk strategy where if the rules change, then it's going to affect them at some point, but it will allow you to kick. Jack, that comment was for you, by the way, because I knew you were still watching. At the end of the day, they can continue to kick the can down the road, but someday the piper has to be paid. So they'll just continue to kick it down the road until someone tells them that they have to pay the money. Yeah. And then they'll get it done because they get it done every year. I think they've been in worse cap situations than this one. But what will be interesting is that they're in such a situation now where they can only have average players. They can only have average players now in quite a lot of positions because they can't afford to pay that many premium players. So even if they get Watson, they're going to struggle to get him weapons. They're going to have to rely on the draft because they're not going to be able to afford. They're not going to be able to sign a Juju. They're not going to be able to sign an Allen
Jarvis
Robinson,
Landry. No.
Jarvis Landry. I mean, that's a massive step down. But yeah, they're just not going to be able to get these guys.
So then, I know. Saints or Panthers, what do you reckon? what do you think his choice would be?
If I'm Watson,
in terms of the teams and who you'd be playing with, and
I'd go at the Saints. It wouldn't even be close. Like if you're telling me that my choice was those two teams, as much as I dislike the New Orleans Saints from a fandom perspective, they're a better franchise. They're a better run franchise. They're a more consistent franchise. Yes, they've got a new head coach, but he's been there a long. Yep. He's been there a long time, and he's the former head coach as well. So he's not new. It's not like he's just come out of nowhere. Dennis Allen is one of the best coordinators in the game, or he was until he was promoted. As bad as that team is, they'll get something. Like, they were not a good team last year, and they still won 8 games.
True.
Like, for me, if I'm choosing between teams, I'm going to always pick the team that has more of a pedigree in terms of the way that the organization is run. And it's maybe a bit unfair on David Tepper because he's only been there a couple of years, but you've got a coach that's on the hot seat. You've got a brand new offensive coordinator after Joe Brady was fired. I think unfairly, but someone had to carry the can for last season, and it was him. So I think at the end of the day, I'd always pick the stable franchise. But it would shock me if I would watch the Cleveland Browns. I really would watch the Cleveland Browns for Deshaun Watson. I really think that they will make a huge play for him and trade Baker Mayfield.
If they can find a suitor. Yeah.
I don't think it would take much.
No, not if people are signing Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah, we don't want him in the AFC North, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, but he'll be banned. He'll get a ban this year. I think...
Let's hope we play before he plays.
I mean, it's a great division, the AFC North, for quarterbacks. You've got Joe Burrow. Imagine if Deshaun Watson goes there. You'd have Joe Burrow, you'd have Lamar Jackson, former MVP, you'd have Deshaun Watson, and then you'd have Mitchell Trubisky. I mean...
It's almost like the AFC West as well, right?
Listen, I like Derek Carr. I'm not going to besmirch Derek Carr. I think he's a massively underrated.
He is.
I think he's a top 5 quarterback, top 10 quarterback. No, but I think he's a heavily underrated quarterback and underappreciated. And I will not besmirch him with the same level of joy and angst as Mitchell Trubisky. Thank you very much.
Fair.
You never know.
Right. Hannah, before we call it a day, thanks for coming on. Tell people where they can find you, where they can ask the questions you've asked them to come and reach out for, what you're going to be doing, and tell us a bit where we can find you.
Yeah, so on Twitter, I am at Hannah Rowland. I've put a few things, like Dan said, a few bits and bobs that you might find interesting. You can go and read. You're always welcome to send me a message, beginners, whatever. I'm always open to chatting with you all. Hopefully my first article for 5 Yards should be out over the next few weeks. So have a look out there. Obviously, we'll share that on Twitter too, but I'm sure you'll see me around in Sleeper and, many other different leagues. So if you do, give me a hi. It'd be great to just, speak to as many people as possible. And also, I should hopefully see you in July at the Collective.
Yes. Your ticket's purchased. I'll be there.
Absolutely. I'll be there.
I better be there.
I'll be there.
Murf will be there, and many other names. And if I can, Murf tickets are selling out incredibly quickly still. So we're getting to the stage now, counting down rather than counting up. We're not counting how many sold, we're counting how many's left. So if you haven't got one, please do. I think it'd be a matter of a couple of weeks and they'll be all gone, which is still 3 months out from the event. So that's awesome. So check out, I think it's at _UKFFC for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Not much. There'll be some pods dropping every day this week for free agency, where I'll be catching you up to date with everything that's going on. So there'll be more podcasts than usual. For those of you that have been subscribers for many years, we'll understand that is pretty much what we do. We'll talk through all the deals where possible and what's left and everything. I will say this: I've got a draft. I've got a NFL rookies risers and fallers for the draft article going on Fantasy Pros at some point this week. It's written, and I'm just waiting for it to be published. But it's interesting because it talks about some of the free agency moves that have happened and what effect that's going to have on NFL rookies and whose stock is rising and falling. So I would recommend that for anyone that's interested in dynasty and rookies.
Super.
Other than that, lots of programming this week. I'm so glad Hannah's been on because,
too.
The thing for me when I started doing rookie stuff and like getting new players in was who's going to take this up? Is anyone actually interested? Am I just wasting my time? And it's been great just to meet Hannah through this process, but it's also just been awesome to watch her take it on board and show the game like the love and care and interest and curiosity and passion that I want, that I have as a fan, you have as a fan, Dan, and everyone who is watching and listening. So it's just awesome to have people take it on and do that. So thank you, Hannah, for everything over the last year or so, because I think you've helped me in a long way, like pass on the fantasy football sort of love and community aspect of it. So I massively appreciate you and all the questions and the curiosity and everything that you do and our friendship, because it's been so great getting to know you over the last year as well. So thank you very much for humoring me, I guess, more than me humoring you.
And I will say, if anyone's in Hannah's position now or in a similar position and is interested and intrigued based on what we've said here, reach out to Murf, reach out to myself, reach out to Hannah, reach out to the 5 Yard accounts. Nobody's going to think anything worse of you for just saying, hey, this seems like fun. How do I do it? What do I do? Come get involved. Come meet. And say, if you don't like it at the end of the day, no hard feelings, no one done. Give it a go, dip your toe in the water and see how you get on, basically. So, Hannah, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on. Interesting story. Can't wait to play in some leagues with you and see you beat me, same as everyone else beats me. But hey.
No, thank you both so much for having me on and chatting to me today. And hopefully, even if one person who's thinking of starting or just starting, it takes something away, then great. And as I say, both of you, Murf, of course, you introduced me to it, so I'm forever grateful. But both of you guys have helped and supported me, throughout the year, along with a load of other people. So it's a great community, and if you want to join, please, do chat to everyone, get involved. It's great fun.
Awesome. Murf, send us on our way.
Well, I thought I'd share us with news that makes it completely appropriate to end the podcast, which is because the Colt McCoy backup quarterback is returning to the Cardinals on a 2-year, $7.5 million deal with $6 million guaranteed. So congratulations, Colt McCoy, for earning $6 million to hold a clipboard.
Just sit down. Yeah.
And that is how you end a podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoying and digesting this one. And until next time, Rush Nation, as always, don't forget, keep rushing.